Well, hello there. How are you today? I'm actually going to take a seat today because my camera is set up for me to be seated so you can see what I'm doing. Welcome. I'm Sue Pelland, and we are sewing in slippers with Sue today. I've got my cup of coffee here, but I am going to put that aside. I don't want to spill it. And just have a little sip here, and then we are going to be facing a quilt today. Now, many of you know that I have been working on my Guild's challenge quilt, and I want to show you that challenge quilt and where it stands. Well, the challenge already happened, unfortunately. I didn't get my quilt done in time to hang it for the challenge. It was completely finished except for the binding. So I want to show you the method of binding that I'm going to use for this quilt. And while I show you that method of binding, take note, it's going to be a really easy way to finish an art quilt like this one. So what makes an art quilt different from a utilitarian quilt? Well, an art quilt to me is something that you're going to hang on the wall. That's meant to be a piece of artwork and not something that you're going to be using on a bed cover, etc. So this one obviously is an art quilt. It's made to hang on the wall. So we're going to frame it like a piece of art. And in order to do that, I'm not going to put a binding on it because to me that makes it look like a quilt instead of a piece of art. So instead, we're going to face this quilt and have it stand all by itself. The binding is a very traditional way to finish a quilt. And to me, it looks like a quilt that way. When you have a binding on it, it looks like something that's going to go on the bed. So I want to update this look and make a facing instead of a binding. But I'll tell you a secret. I've never done this before in the way that I'm going to try it today. So I've been watching a couple of YouTube videos, and there's some good ones out there. I'll put some links in the comments. Once I find those links, I'll put those links in the comments so you can see other people's facing tutorials. But I'm going to take the ideas that I found in several different tutorials, and I'm going to incorporate them into my quilt the way I want to do it. So one of the ways to make a piece of an art quilt like this a little bit more artsy is to put it on a stabilizer. So this one has a quilt backing, but it also has a layer of, it's a stabilizer that goes in between. And this one is the one by Lazy Girl Designs. And it's called, oh my goodness, what is it called? I don't remember the name of it, but I will put that in the comments as well. So I did put a stabilizer in between the layers, and that made it rather thick. I had already put a layer of batting when I made this crazy quilt topping. There's already a layer of batting in there, but it was really a soft batting. It was a polyester batting, and it was really flexible, and it wasn't holding its shape really well. So I decided to put a layer of the Lazy Girl Design stabilizer behind there before I quilted. So this was done kind of quilt and flip, so stitch and flip. So it was already pre-quilted, this part with the batting only, but the batting wasn't stiff enough. So I went ahead and put the stabilizer behind it. And then I did some walking foot quilting right in the ditch. After I did my cactus, which is all fused applique, I just stitched around the applique, and that goes all the way through to the backing as well. So my quilting was done with walking foot quilting and free motion quilting. Now I still have my free motion quilting foot on my machine, and I'm going to need to change that over to a regular foot to put on my facing. So I'm going to grab my little screwdriver here, and let's go ahead and change that foot out as we talk about the rest of this process. So when you're putting a binding on your quilt, One of the most important things you can do is square up your quilt prior to binding. So I want to show you a couple of different techniques for squaring up your quilt prior to binding. Now, to put the facing on, I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to put my 1/4 inch foot on my machine to get this quilt ready, or to get my machine ready to face this quilt. But then we need to talk about our facing color. What are we going to use to face this quilt? Well, the difference between a facing and a binding, they're basically very similar. So a facing and a binding are going to be made the exact same way. But when you make a facing and you sew it onto your quilt, we're going to be bringing that facing all the way to the back of the quilt. So that means I'm not going to see it on the front. Ideally, I'm not going to see that facing on the front. However, it happens, right? If we don't press really well, or if we just don't do a good job on our facing, you might see a little bit of that on the front. So for that reason, I've got my challenge here of what color to choose. I could choose a navy to go with all of my top fabrics here. I could choose a brown to go with all of my fabrics down on the bottom here, or I could choose a green to go with the cacti that are hanging over the edge of the piece. So let's see what I have. I have this beautiful green fabric, and I know I have enough of this. It was used for the back of a quilt, and this is left over from the back of the quilt. So I've got quite a bit of length, and this would work out really well for the facing. However, it's going to show on the brown. It's going to show on the green, and it's a different color green than the cacti. So while it's a good choice, I'm not sure it's my best choice, but that's the one I had planned to use. So I didn't pull out a lot of other fabrics. Now I could use the same fabric as I have on the back for the facing, because that way when the facing turns to the back, you're not going to see it as much. It's all going to blend in. And while I think that would be a really good choice for the sake of the back of the quilt, for the front of the quilt, that's going to make it even harder to camouflage if you see any of that facing on the front. So for that reason, I'm probably not going to use that fabric that I used on the back. However, it would force me to do a really good job on my facing, and it would really look pretty from the back. So that might be a good option. But what I'm thinking is I also have this blue fabric, and although it's a brighter blue, I have a lot of this fabric. Again, it was the back of a quilt, and I've got a lot left over. So it would go really well against this blue. It's going to be pretty bright against those greens. It's a little bit brighter than all of our beiges over here. So once again, it's really going to show if I don't do a good job on that binding. So that's why I had come up with this green. Even though it has some contrast to the other colors, it's a nice dark green. It doesn't jump out at you. So if I did see a little bit of this green, it probably wouldn't be the end of the world. So let's go ahead and use this green. And in order to use that green, I think I'm going to choose some green thread to go with it as well. I hadn't decided on my backing, on my facing. So I brought out all these different threads, and I think the green one that I have there is the best one because I can't reach my thread rack right now. So I'm going to just go ahead with what I have. So let's go ahead and press this fabric, and then we're going to cut the binding from that fabric. Now, what size do you like to cut your bindings? Typically, bindings are cut either 2 1/4 or 2 1/2. Some people might make wider bindings than that, but that's my go-to is 2 1/4 or 2 1/2. For a regular binding, generally 2 1/2 is a little bit wide for me. I tend to go 2 1/4 on my bindings. Now, if you do something different, let me know in the chat. Hey, Ellie, so nice to see you. Kathy in Ohio. Hi there. How are you? Ellie, so nice to hear from you. Tell me how you're doing. And let me know that you're doing okay. Let me know if you're enjoying watching our events on YouTube and on Zoom. You're watching maybe some recordings of the classes that I've done on Zoom, and hopefully that is making your process of recovery going a little bit faster. So welcome, Ellie. So nice to see you. Well, I'm going to go ahead and cut some of this fabric into my 2 1/2 or 2 1/4 inch strips. And I'm going to choose 2 1/4 because that is a good size for a facing that's going all the way to the back. It could even be smaller than that, but I think 2 1/4 is a nice measurement. So let me get out some other things here that I'm going to need. I've got my big, huge ruler right here. That's going to be great for squaring up that quilt. It's 20 1/2 inches, but this is a long, skinny quilt. So I think that my 24-inch ruler is going to be just right. And the quilt needs to finish up at 24 by 12. That was the measurement for this challenge. So I'm a little bit long. I'm good on my width here. I've got 12 1/2, and we need a 1/2 inch seam allowance. But this way, I'm a little bit long, and I hated to give up any of my cacti down here. And I also hated to give up any of that top edge. But I think I'm going to take a little bit off that top edge because I've got an extra inch, and I need this to be 24 1/2. So I'm going to take off about 1/4 of an inch. I want to measure that again. And we want to make sure everything is nice and straight. Now, if I had a big quilt, I would use my quilter's chalk line to square up the edges of that quilt. And I would snap a line, making sure I've got 90 degrees in the corner so that everything is nice and straight and square. But this one's a little bit smaller. I don't need that chalk line. I can simply use my big ruler here. So there we have it. We're at 24 1/2 right there, and that is perfect. So this is a big wide piece of fabric. I'm not going to need that many strips. Probably just 2 strips will be enough. But another thing that I'm going to need are some corners for our facing. So let me explain what I mean by that after I cut these 2 strips. And I think 2 strips is enough to go all the way around the quilt. And you'll notice my my station here is piled up with some products. And I've got some new products to show you. So after we do our facing, I'll be showing you some of these products. And the funny thing is I have a brand new rotary cutter that I want to start using. And today, because I'm cutting yardage, I'm using my 45-degree rotary cutter. But normally in all of my projects, I use a 28mm rotary cutter. So I thought, wouldn't it be fun to try to find all of my 28mm rotary cutters? And I didn't look in the drawers here under my table, but I think I've gotten most of them because most of them were normally hanging up on my wall. So as I was getting ready for today's session, I found all of my 28mm rotary cutters. And look what I found. I found my quick change rotary cutter. That's my newest one. The quick change is fabulous for changing your blade. I have 1, 2, 3 of the old style rotary cutters. And look at that. That says Joe on it. I have to return that to Joanne. That's her rotary cutter. So I've got 3 quick change rotary cutters. I've got the Zoid rotary cutter, which is something that I was testing, and it's okay. It's actually kind of nice. That grip is kind of nice. So I have this one too. And I have the Quilter Select rotary cutter, which is kind of nice. It's really heavy, but it's really, really expensive. But I want to unpack one of these new rotary cutters to use for rotary cut applique. And I'm going to unpack this now just because I thought it was funny that I had so many rotary cutters, and here I am opening up another one. Why? Because it's blue. It's such a pretty color. I can't do without a blue rotary cutter. And look, it comes with a nice little extra blade. Now, this isn't something I'm going to use in quilting, but it is a nice little kind of an X-Acto blade or a box opener. And it's retractable, which is nice. So that blade doesn't stay out. It automatically goes back in place. So this is a little bonus when you get the blue rotary cutter. And look, the blue rotary cutter is almost the same color as the Zoid, but this is the quick change. Now, the Zoid also has a quick change. So this is kind of nice. Now, I don't carry these on my website. I was just testing it to see how I liked it. And I have no objection to it. It's working just fine. But Olfa is my go-to brand. I mean, that's the brand I always get. So now I have my blue rotary cutter. I've got my blue chalk line, and I've got some other products over here too in the blue. But I'm gonna move forward. I don't want to talk about those yet because I didn't intend to talk about these yet either, but I got distracted. Now that I have my binding, and let's check how far that's going to go around the quilt. So it's going to go around here. And then when I turn my corner, it's going to go here. And then I'm going to go back again. And is one strip going to be enough? No, one strip is not going to be enough. But we are not binding this quilt the way people typically would. What we're going to do is we're going to be putting this facing on. And the facing can be an inch shorter than my sides. So let's go ahead and look at that. And I'm going to take this off to the side. And I'm going to trim this to about an inch shorter than my side. So let's see. I've got one. And now let's cut a second one that same length. Two. You're going to find this method so easy and so much fun to do that you're never going to want to bind a quilt again. However, is this a good alternative to binding when you're making a quilt? No, not really. This is something I would only do for art quilts. So I'm going to cut another facing piece that is the length of my side minus about an inch, 3/4 of an inch. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. Look at that. I can almost get the 2 out of 1, so I'm going to do that. Even if it is a little shorter than I said, even if it's shorter than 1 inch from each end, that's okay. I'm going to save fabric, and I'm going to use this piece. So there we go. I cut 2 strips, and look, I only needed 1, but that's okay. We're going to go with that. Now, the next thing that we're going to need is some corners. So I'm going to toss that aside, and I'm going to make my corners out of the same fabric as my facing. Now, I could have used blue corners up here and beige corners down here, and even maybe a green corner down here, because that really would have helped me to turn this and make it invisible. So if I had thought of that ahead of time, I would have pulled out all those colors. But instead, I'm just going to take my green fabric. Oh my goodness, too many rotary cutters. Let's put all those aside. But the idea is I want to cut this fabric into some squares. So not triangles. We're going to use some squares. So let me get my ruler. And seeing that I have my 6-inch ruler out, let's go ahead and make 6-inch squares. Or look at this. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've got 9 inches. So why don't I go ahead and make smaller squares? Let's make my squares 4.5 and see if that's going to be big enough. So as I mentioned, I'm learning today. I have watched this done. many, many times on YouTube. I haven't done a faced quilt in years. So we're learning together, as we always do here on Sewing in Slippers with Sue. We're practicing these skills together. We're figuring it out. And I don't claim to be the expert, but I'm really good at figuring things out. So that's what we're going to do together today, is figure out this facing technique and do it together, because I haven't done it for a very long time. So let's go ahead and grab my iron here. And now I'm going to fold these triangles in half, right sides, pretty sides out, pretty sides out. And I will tell you, I always do this facing wrong. So we're going to pin first before we sew to make sure that I don't do my facing wrong this time. And let's talk, while I'm getting this facing ready, let's talk about the reason why I didn't get this done in time for the challenge. Well, I'm a procrastinator. I don't know about you, but when I have a deadline, I often wait, or I'll get half the project done, and then I get complacent. And I say, oh, I'm almost there. I'll definitely get this done in time for the deadline. So I take my foot off the gas. And I want to say that that is a trend in my life, that I take my foot off the gas before I should. And that's true in my business. That's true in just about everything I do. And that's what makes me a procrastinator. It's not until I wait to the last minute to do things, which I sometimes do, but I'll start something and then I'll take my foot off the gas. I don't keep going full speed once I start making some progress and getting excited about the result. Then I get distracted. I find some other shiny object that distracts me, and then I move forward with a different project and I say, oh yeah, that one's almost done. I'll be able to get that done in no time at all. Now, another thing about me is I always underestimate the time that it will take to do something, because the methods that I use are typically faster than traditional methods. But just because they're faster, don't fool yourself. Anything worth doing takes time. So I don't want you to rush through this process. And like me, I rushed through the process and I didn't get the exact result that I was looking for. I'm not very happy with my finished challenge quilt. While I do find it very pretty, it's not the quality of workmanship that I normally would like to produce, because I was rushing at the last moment to get this done. And if I had planned ahead and planned a little bit more time to get this done, I wouldn't have to rush through it and I would be happier with the results. So I know that many of us are guilty of that. I am the worst offender when it comes to rushing through things in order to get them done for a deadline. I'm not good at planning my time and doing things in the right time. So, having said that, I still get a lot accomplished and I'm still pretty happy with my results most of the time. But I know if I just took my time and did things a little bit more meticulously, I would be even happier with the results and I wouldn't feel so rushed and under the gun to get things done. So I'm going to pin on my 4 corners. Let's make sure I do this in the right order. So I'm going to pin on my 4 corners, and I can even temporarily baste those on. And then I'm going to pin on my 4 sides of my quilt. This is the 4 facing pieces. Now you'll notice that on my facings, I didn't even turn under the edges. I simply cut my piece 2¼ and now that it's going on the quilt, I wished I had cut it at 2½ or even 3 inches. It doesn't matter how wide it is because you're not encapsulating those edges. You're actually going to turn the whole thing to the back. So if it's wider, it gives you more to work with when you're pressing. And when you bring that to the back, a wider piece is going to be easier to work with because you can pull at it. You can adjust it as you are pressing your edges. So I wish I had gone a little bit wider. So let me say that I would cut these 3 inches the next time instead of 2¼ Okay. I can do that, right? I have the fabric right here. I can certainly do that. So let me take this one off. I'm going to cut these at 3 because I think it'll be much easier to work with. Then I'm going to put on my 4 corners. But just to test this theory of how this works, I'm going to go ahead and pin this bottom one on with the 2¼ knowing that ultimately I'm going to end up using 3 inches. But I just want to pin this on so that we can test the theory of, do we have these corners and the facing in the right order? So I'm putting my corners on first, and then I'm going to put my facing on, and then I'm going to do a test stitch. And I want to show you if that's wrong or right. And let's go ahead and do it. And I'm not going to divulge the answer. Whoops. I'm just going to sew this one here. And I'm going to go right around that corner. And I'm not worrying about finishing these edges. Well, we can certainly stitch this, and I think I will because it'll be easier to do that test run with some stitching. So let me go ahead and turn my stitching onto a basting stitch. So I'm going way up. I'm going like 4½ for my basting stitch. And I'm just going to push this off onto the floor. Oh, by the way, I'm going to be teaching Appliqué School tonight. So if you want to come to Appliqué School, you'll need to go to my website to sign up. And even if you sign up within the last hour, a half an hour before Appliqué School, you will get the Zoom link as long as you sign up on my website. Now, I can't manually send out any Zoom links, so this all happens automatically. And 30 minutes before the event, the last Zoom link goes out. So even if you sign up 30 minutes before the event on any night of the event, so it could be today, it could be tomorrow, it could be the next day. As long as you sign up 30 minutes before, you're going to get the Zoom link for all 3 nights. So if you're watching this tomorrow, if you didn't catch me live and you're watching tomorrow and you say, oh, I forgot to sign up for Appliqué School, go ahead and still sign up. You can come for 1 day or all 3. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to go ahead and narrow up my stitch so that I get the true 1/4 inch. And I'm using a basting stitch. And today I'm using gray thread. It's just kind of a neutral thread. And I'm going to go right down the side of that triangle. I'm going to stop a 1/4 inch away from the edge so that I can pivot and come up this side. Now on this side, I've got my facing. So I'm going to put my facing into that corner. And remember, my facing stops a good inch or 1/2 inch away from that corner, and it doesn't matter. It's okay that it stops shy of the corner. And why am I doing this with a basting stitch? Because I haven't done this in so long, I'm afraid that I may have done it in the wrong order. Does my triangle go first, or does my facing go first? So I'm going to test out that theory. I'm going to test out the right answer by basting on these 2 bottom corners and that facing. And I'm just basting because what if I do it wrong? if I do it wrong, I want to be able to pull it out again really easily. So I know that with a big 4-inch, 4mm basting stitch, I'm going to be able to pull this out super easy if I did it wrong. So how do we know? Well, once you have your strip on here, I'm going to finger press that out, and then I'm going to turn this so that I'm poking out those corners. Okay, and I haven't trimmed any corners yet. I haven't reduced my bulk. I'm simply turning those corners out so I can see, did I do this in the right order? And indeed, I did. So now we have our corners on the back that can hold our dowel to hold this quilt up. We have our facing on the front, and we want to pull that facing all the way to the back so that it has a nice flat knife edge right here. And I'm going to bring it a little bit more towards the back than towards the front. I'm going to exaggerate bringing that to the back so I can see the quilt front on the back. And then I'm going to hand stitch this in place. So you can see why under here, I've got the ends of my facing pieces. I didn't turn them under. I didn't hem the ends. I don't have them going all the way to the end. It doesn't matter. I have them going to about a 1/2 inch away to 1 inch away. It doesn't matter. You could have it end all the way over here, 2 inches away from that end, and it's still going to be covered by that corner. So now that I know I did this the right way, and I'm going to have those pretty green corners on there, I'm going to go around all 4 sides and do the same, but I'm going to do that with a 3-inch piece. I just want a little bit more here, so that when I pull this to the back and I'm pressing it, I don't have to worry about my fingers. You know what? I'm being too cautious. I really don't need to do 3 inches. I think I can get by with this one. Yeah, I'm just going to get by with the 2 1/4. But you can see if I had a little bit more fabric here, it might be a little bit easier to work with. But you know, I've already got it cut. I've already got it pressed. I've already got it ready to go. So now I want to worry about those corners. So I've done it the right way. So now I'm going to go back to leaving it flat. And then I'm going to do all 4 sides that way. But I do want to worry about these corners. When I cut these corners, or when I turn these corners, there's a lot of bulk right there because I use the stabilizer, I use the batting, there's many layers of fabric here. So I want to make sure I reduce that bulk. So how am I going to reduce the bulk in the corners? I'm not going to do it yet because I need to restitch this with a good 1/4 inch seam and not a basting stitch. I want to do a regular stitch. But after I've done all that stitching, I'm going to grab my nice sharp scissors. And I can use any nice sharp scissors that I have. I love my Tim Holtz scissors right here. They're the same ones as the Karen K. Buckley's, basically. They do have that serrated edge. And I can trim this on an angle to get rid of some of that bulk. So that's the first thing I'm going to do, is I'm going to trim with my scissors on an angle to get rid of some of the bulk here with the batting. I'm going to do that all the way up to the corner. Then I'm going to clip my corner, and I'm even going to angle down on the corners to reduce the bulk in those corners. Now, I'm not going to do that yet because I still have to do my sewing. And since we have some time, I'll probably do the sewing with you. So let's take a little break from this facing. Although I do want to show you the finished result, but I want to show you some of the other products that I have picked up along the way. I'm doing a quilt show next week in Cape Cod, on Cape Cod. And I'm saying to myself, this guild already owns everything that I sell because they supported me so beautifully last year. So what else can I get for this guild that would be interesting and different and unique? And if I find something I like, it will probably go up on the website. So you and I are looking at this together for the first time. This is the quilt ruler stand from Purple Hobbies. It's for rulers up to 1/8 of an inch thick. So this is not for your machine quilting rulers. And that's what I bought this for, was for my machine quilting rulers. So, excuse me. So look at the fine print. If it says it's not for the ruler that you want to use it for, then not a good choice, right? But I have all of my Hearts and More templates here, and a typical ruler stand doesn't have enough slots for me. So I want to see how this does with my Rings and Things rulers, with my Hearts and More rulers. Okay, it was a little lopsided there. Wait a minute. What happens when I just put one in? Okay, look at that. If I put one on the end, it flipped over because this is really top heavy because it's so big. So let's hold it down with the little tab. Then we're going to put another one in, and another one in, and another one in, and more and more and more. Look, it's still wanting to flip over because I've got my biggest one on that end. So first of all, not impressed if my ruler stand is going to fall over. I would have to balance my ruler stand every time I use it. Okay. What about that long ruler? Does it stay up? Pretty well, right? It does okay. But what if those are moving on me? Is that ruler stand going to be strong enough? Yeah, actually, it's not bad here. Whoops, there it goes. So you're going to have to be a little bit careful if you're going to use this ruler stand standing out on your table. Now, the reason why I thought this would be a good item to test is that you can link more than one together. They are made so that you can link them together. So you can just put them side by side. So you're growing your ruler stand and making it longer. And then you have more room for your rulers. But you know what? It doesn't lock together. So these little tabs right here, wouldn't it be nice if they locked together? And they don't. They just go one beside the other. So this is not a bad product. I'm not knocking it, but it's not what I thought it was going to be, right? It's not as strong. It's not as rubbery. It's not the configuration that I would like to have that would fit my quilting rulers as well as my cutting rulers. Now, I do have some quilting rulers out in the other room, but this specifically says for rulers up to 1/8 of an inch. And my quilting rulers are 1/4 of an inch. So it's telling me right there, it's not made for what I bought it for. So shame on me for not looking at the instructions first. It is holding these rulers really nicely, even if they're not balanced. They are, yeah, look at that. See, it fell right over. So it's not doing the job that I wanted it to do. I will not be carrying these on my website store, but I will bring them to the show on the Cape because maybe people are looking at these in the catalogs. Maybe people are saying, oh, I wish I had some of those. So I'm going to put these out on my table at the Cape and let people play with them and let them decide. Is this a ruler stand that you're going to enjoy? I'm going to bring several different rulers to see how they fit in there. If you put your rulers sideways like this, I put my Leaves Galore sideways like this. I think they're going to work out just fine. But I'm not a huge fan. This is not what I wanted. It's not what I expected. And I have to say, I'm just a little bit disappointed in this ruler stand. So yes, while it works, it has its negatives as well as its positives. I'm going to add another one of my rulers here. Because my rulers only have an area right here that goes down to the table, I have to set them in just so in order to have them in that ruler stand. But, you know, it depends on the person. If you're going to like this or not, it's going to depend on how you use it, where you're going to put it, how it's going to hold those rulers for you. You get to decide if this ruler stand is going to work for you or not. What I like about the ruler stand is it has little rubber grips on the bottom. So it's not going to slide around on your table. It grips the table. So I just thought of something. What if we put them side by side? What if I put one here and one here, and then I go across with my big ruler and just line it up just so, right? Then when I go to put my other rulers in, I've got a lot better chance of these standing up straight because it's not just holding one little leaf on the bottom. It's actually holding two at a time. Then I can put my other rulers here and here. So I can separate these. I can pull them together. I can put all of my other rulers on there. And that's a little bit more stable when you're using the two of them. And I can even put my little tiny ones up here so they don't get lost. All right, I'm liking this better when I use two together. So that's a little thought, is to use two of these together and use them sideways for your big long rulers. So here on the table, it would be nice to have my rulers on the table, but I'm going to show you an even better method. If you have a metal table like I do, I bought these little hooks off of Amazon, and I'm able to hook my tools onto the side of my table and have them handy whenever I need them. And then they're not going to be getting knocked off the table and falling off the edge of the table while I'm demonstrating. Now, I demonstrate all the time, so I would find this a little cumbersome and awkward because I've got to be moving it around on my table as I'm demonstrating. But if you have a spot that it can stay and just sit there, then I think you'd be a little bit more happy with it. So that's my review of the Purple Hobbies quilt ruler stand for quilt rulers up to 1/8 inch thick. Those are cutting rulers, not quilting rulers. All right, let's get back to the project at hand. So I wanted to show you the blue ruler stand, the new blue rotary cutter, of course, my blue quilter's chalk line, and I love the way it matches this pretty blue spray bottle. Now, if you don't have one of these spray bottles yet, that's another great little tool. So there you have it. There's lots of little tools that I enjoy using in my sewing room. And I don't think this quilt stand is going to work out for me because of the way I have to move it around all the time when I'm demonstrating. I don't think that that ruler stand is going to work out great for my purposes, but you get to decide for yourself if this is something you would like or not. Now, it's not going to go on my website, but if you just have to have one, please email me and we can take care of you. Because I'm not going to put those on my website. I am going to bring them only to the quilt show next week. And I'm sure somebody is going to love having those. And then by next week, I'll probably be out of them. So if it's something that you want to try, you want to test it out, let me know and I will get you one of those ruler stands. I don't even know the price. I have no idea what the price is because that was not my first concern. My first concern is always, does it work? If something works, I'm willing to pay just about any price that they are asking for a product like that, because if it works, it's worth the price, almost no matter what that price is. If it doesn't work, then it's not worth it, even if it's $10 or $5 or $2. So it's all about, does it work? And then once I figure out if it works for me or not, then I decide, does it go on the website? And if it goes on the website, then I will figure out the pricing. So know that whenever you see something on my website, I have tested it. I've made sure that it is a quality product that I would use. And if it's something that you would like to have, let me know. If it's not on my website, I can always do special orders. And if it's something that I truly love and use all the time, those are the things that you're going to find on my website store. All right, I'm going to go around and I'm going to add the facings to this quilt. This time I'm going to stitch it with a regular stitch, not a basting stitch. And I'm putting them about an inch away from the ends of my quilt, all the way across and about an inch away. All right, don't know where my pins are right now, so I'm going to use a few pins as possible. Let me come on over here to my sewing. I like the new setup here for my sewing station, so that with the camera on the computer, you can see my pressing, my cutting, and my sewing station all at the same time. The only problem is I can't move around my sewing room when it is positioned this way. So every time I do sewing in slippers, I need to rearrange my sewing room for you and for my applique school that's going to happen this evening. So that's okay. I don't mind rearranging the sewing room, but it's not really the best configuration for everyday sewing for me, but it is the best way for you to see what I'm doing. So let's go ahead and bring this back down to a 2.5 on my stitch length. I've still got that 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And if I were to do this again, I would consider doing a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance. What is that going to do for me? Well, I need to bring this seam allowance toward the back. A 1/4 of an inch is not a whole lot to turn toward the back. If I had a bigger seam allowance, I feel like it might be easier to keep this facing on the back of the quilt. So that's something I'm going to have to test. All of the videos that I've watched say that you can use a 1/4 of an inch. I'm theorizing that a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance might be a little bit better. So I'm not going to do that on this one because I only planned a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance to make my quilt exactly 12 by 24. And that was the challenge. And when you enter a challenge, you have to follow the challenge instructions specifically because the challenge organizer is planning on a display of these quilts that all look exactly the same size. So when we hang them in a quilt show, all the same size quilts will look beautiful and hang beautifully on our quilt racks. So when you enter a challenge, it's very important that you get the size, the same size that the organizer has asked for. Now, many of you are going to participate in our Appliqué Design Challenge. For our Appliqué Design Challenge, there is a specific size for your quilt. Make sure your quilt measures that specific size when you are done, you know, plus or minus a 1/4 of an inch or a 1/2 an inch. I'm not going to be that critical, but say you entered the Cherrywood Challenge, or who else puts on a challenge? The Hoffman Challenge, right? Those companies are going to be much more specific on the dimensions that you can submit. because they have so many quilts to evaluate, they have to eliminate some if they don't follow the instructions. So your quilt could be eliminated, even if it's the most gorgeous quilt in the world. Your quilt could be eliminated just based on the fact that you didn't follow the size requirements. So I would say make sure your size is reasonably close to what was asked, within 1/4 of an inch. And I think you're going to be okay. All right. I've gone all the way around. So I'm going to cut my threads. And now we're going to press this. Now, using this particular iron is a little different than your standard iron, because I have to hang on to this iron in order for it to go down. The second I lift up or let my hand off, it's going to lift up. So I'm going to press this facing out. Now, one thought and one school of thought is that if you top stitch right here next to that facing, you're going to get a better finish. Now, I'm not going to do that until I bring my facing to the back. And in order to bring my facing to the back, I've got to turn out these corners. But I'm going to iron out my facing on all 4 sides before I turn out those corners. I'm also going to trim my corners before I turn out those corners, because I don't want to have to turn it back again in order to trim. So we have just enough time for me to get this quilt done. And isn't that silly? It's only taken an hour of my time, whereas I've been showing you all those other things. So say a half an hour of my time. I could have gotten this quilt done for the challenge, and I simply ran out of time. How silly is that? That over the course of 6 months of knowing about this challenge, I didn't plan that extra half an hour to get this done. So let that be a lesson to you. Do as I say, not as I do. If you are planning to submit a quilt for our Sue Pelland Designs Challenge, let's not wait until the last second to get that done. Let's get it done early so that you can be proud of your work. You can submit the work that you are proud of. You've done the best job possible because you didn't have a race to the finish. So now I'm going to take the quilt backing and I'm going to trim it down because I used all that stabilizer. I really made a very, very thick quilt here. So I'm going to use my scissors at an angle, cutting the edges of that quilt down right to that seam allowance. Okay, right to my seam. Now I'm trying not to cut the actual seam allowance on the facing itself. And the way I'm doing that is by angling my scissors. So it's only catching the batting and the backing. It's not catching the front of the quilt or the facing on the front. So I'm just trimming down my excess bulk, especially at those corners. And I'm going to trim my corners straight across and at that 45-degree angle. Holding your scissors at that 45-degree angle is key. And that's called grading your seams. And I learned that in my home ec class in high school. I learned to grade my seams on clothing to eliminate the bulk in the seams before finishing the seams with a serger or some other method of finishing your seams. So we're just going to trim all that down. And you do have to be careful here. You don't want to cut through those seam allowance threads. You don't want to cut your facing, which is, you've just pressed it. So you want to make sure that goes towards the back before you trim at an angle. Okay, I think I've got it most of the way around. Let's just finish it. Let's just do it. Because if I only half finish it for you here, I know that this is going to go away and I'll never get it finished. Let's get it done. So even if we take a few extra minutes here to trim, because I want to show you the finished result. And of course, it's going to require some hand stitching. And I'm not going to be able to do the hand stitching here on YouTube, but I will get the hand stitching done. And then I will post my results on the Facebook group. And that will remind me to get this job done, because I've already told you I'm going to post on the Facebook group. So now I have to hold myself to it. So we're getting rid of all that extra bulk, especially in those corners. And now we're ready to turn that facing. So we're going to take our corner, going to get our fingers into that corner, and I'm going to cut some of the corner fabric and batting straight across that corner. And then I'm going to flip this, poke out that corner as best I can with my fingernail, and then go to the next one. So I'm using my fingernail as opposed to like the end of my hero marker, because I want it to be soft. I don't want to poke this out with a pin. I don't want to poke it out with my scissors, because that could poke through all of the layers. So I'm simply going to wiggle it out with my fingers and make it go out on that corner. Let's see, I'm going to trim up some of this excess fabric in the corner. I'm going to cut right across the corner, get rid of all of that mess, and turn that corner out, just using my fingernails to poke it through. You can use the rounded part of your hero marker, but I don't want you using a pin, and I don't want you using the scissors, because that could poke right through, and then you're going to have repair to clean up, right? Instead of just having a little bit of a rounded corner, I don't want you to have a repair that you have to make on your quilt. So I think that's good enough. And now we're going to pull that facing to the back. This is a great time for those little clips. Let's get some of our binding clips out. And this is also a great time for your Roxanne glue baste it. You can pull this towards the back. We're going to press it there, and we're going to put our little binding clips along that edge. And I can actually see the quilt front coming toward the back. So I'll show you what I mean in just a minute here. Let me get to one corner. I'm using my fingernail to open up that seam allowance, and I'm getting that quilt front to come toward the back. Let me come around the corner, and we'll just get one corner done here so I can show you that up close. All right, all the way around. So how are we going to use that Roxanne glue baste it? Well, you can absolutely put a little line of glue right under here and press that down so that you could have that secure with just the glue. But I'm going to go ahead and stitch that down with a hand stitching to keep it nice and flat. Now you can see on these corners, if you're pressing toward the back, you want to pull those corners toward the back so you can see that quilt top coming toward the back, just a hair, just like that. Now that makes this poof up just a little bit. That's okay. That's where you're going to put your slat or a piece of a wooden yardstick, a dowel. You need a little bit of fullness here so that it doesn't pull when you put a piece of wood behind there. So don't be afraid to pull this toward the back just a hair, just a scotch, um, so that you can see the fabric from the front coming toward the back. And then when you hand stitch, make sure that it's all even there. And then you get this beautiful look on the front. So it looks like your piece just ends. So it's framed. It's not framed with a binding frame. It's just comes together so beautifully. Nice square corners, nice flat edges. This looks like a piece of art rather than a quilt that you're going to put on your bed. And see how nice it is with that extra layer of the stabilizer in there as well. So I've got my work cut out for me. I'm going to need to do some hand stitching, and you can see on the back how beautifully that comes together. You are going to see the green on the back, the green corners. I could have used the background fabric so it all would have blended in, but it wouldn't have been as easy to get a nice clean look on the front with any of that light color fabric showing through. Now, because I'm pulling towards the back, you really could use any color you want as long as you're careful to pull this toward the back. Now, some people will go ahead and pull this out, and you can do a stitch in the ditch right here along the edge of your facing. If you stitch in the ditch right here, it helps your facing to lay like you've pulled it out when you've done that. So it helps that quilting lay towards the back with just a hair of that front fabric coming towards the back. It's another step. I don't find it's all that necessary as long as I'm doing a really good job pressing. I don't feel like the stitching in the ditch is 100% necessary, but you know what? For an art piece, it kind of makes sense to do everything that you can to make it look professional. So there you have it. We have just faced our quilt. I've got some hand stitching to do, and watch on my Facebook group, Rotary Cut Appliqué with Sue Pelland. And eventually, once I have time to do this hand stitching, it might be next week while I'm on the Cape, while I'm sitting at the hotel at night. Once I have time to do the hand stitching and this is completely done, I will share a picture with all of you. Now we're past 12 o'clock and I've got to go get ready for Appliqué School. So don't forget, we're doing Appliqué School today, tomorrow, and Thursday from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Today, I'll be looking at rotary cut applique. Tomorrow, we'll be doing hand applique. And on day 3, I'll be showing you when I use glue to make glue applique. Now, all of these techniques I share with you for free, and you can ask me any questions that you have about applique or about working with me in the future. So for now, thanks for joining me on Sewing in Slippers with Sue. I hope that you all make some beautiful applique quilts and you share them with me on my Facebook page, Fusible Rotary Cut Applique with Sue Pelland. Thank you all, and I'll see you all again soon.